We're going to talk about one of the most critical documents in an entire transaction, and it's called the Disclosure Regarding Real Estate Agency Relationships. This document has to be executed prior to taking a listing and prior to writing an offer. And the reason why that is so critical is because a seller could refuse to pay you your commission if you did not have this document dated and timed prior to any other paperwork in a transaction. And in zip forms, you're going to discover that there are three versions of this disclosure, and a lot of agents get confused and don't really know how to determine which is the right one to use. But if you look closely, right under the title of this document, in parentheses, it says listing firm to seller. And another one says selling firm to buyer. So that's how you're going to decide which form you should be using. In this instance, you would be the listing agent. So let's scroll down to the bottom and see how you would fill this out. So in this case, you would click on seller to identify you're working with the seller, and then click on this space and fill in the seller's name. And then over here, when you put the date, you can pick this little calendar and put the date of when you think you're going to be signing this document. And then down here where it says agent, that's actually the name of the brokerage you work for. And the license number is also the license of your brokerage. And then down here where it says buy, that is where you will put your name, the agent's name, and your DRE number. And once again, you can pick the date by selecting the calendar and clicking on the date that you plan on signing this document. Now, in some transactions, you're actually going to have more than one of these disclosures. And so I think it's very important that you read this box. In fact, so let's read it together because it describes exactly how and when to use these forms. The first bullet point says, when the listing brokerage company also represents the buyer or the tenant in a lease transaction, the listing agent shall have one AD form signed by the seller and a different AD form signed by the buyer. So this would be the instance when you are a dual agent and you represent both the seller and the buyer. You would need two separate agency disclosures, one signed by the seller and one signed by the buyer. Bullet point number 2 says, when seller and buyer are represented by different brokerage companies, the listing agent will have one AD form signed by the seller, and the buyer's agent shall have one AD form signed by the buyer, and either that same or a different AD form presented to seller for signature prior to presentation of the offer. If the same form is used, seller may sign here. You will notice on the agency form that says selling agent to seller that this line is blank because it provides a space for the seller to sign and acknowledge the buyer's agent's role in the transaction. So when you're a buyer's agent, you're actually going to have an agency disclosure form with your own client, who is the buyer, and you're going to have another form signed by you and the seller. That way you protect your commission. That's what it's all about. We want to do these transactions and get paid. So I hope this has helped you to understand the various versions of this form, and don't forget to execute it prior to doing any other paperwork in the transaction.